Well, I think Lehman was destined to fail unless the government came in big time, and for one reason or another, they generally said they didn't have the authority. My experience usually is that whatever the government wants to do, they find the authority. But if Merrill Lynch hadn't gotten sold on Sunday, what would have happened Monday would have been off the charts.
So the more important one to save.
Lehman probably should have been, not saved isn't the right word, but transferred in some kind of an orderly manner. I mean, it was the chaos that came after the fact that it just happened, and there was total disorder. And I think the trustee for Lehman has said between 50 and 75 billion at Lehman itself was lost unnecessarily because of the disorderly way that the liquidation took place.
Obviously, there were a lot of calls that were going on behind the scenes at that point. Were you a part of any of those calls?
No, I got a call. I was in Edmonton at a social event. I was at the hotel about 6 o'clock or so Edmonton time, and I did get a call from the head of Barclays, Bob Diamond, and Michael Klein, who was an investment banker, and they had just learned apparently that the British authorities would not allow them to take over all of Lehman. This was not just the part that they took over later, but they were talking about coming in and taking over Lehman. And the British authorities had said if it involved more than £3 billion, as I remember, it needed the vote of shareholders, and that couldn't take place till sometime later, so they were asking if we would write an insurance contract that would protect everybody on the other side of trades until they got that shareholder approval. So they were looking for a solution, I can tell you, at about 8 o'clock on Saturday and 8 o'clock in the evening, and they didn't find one.
Were you surprised? I mean, what happened? Did you turn down this offer? What happened?
Well, what happened is they described a transaction to me that I really couldn't grasp quickly, and so I asked them to send me a fax at the hotel. I was going to go to the social affair that would break up around midnight. Send me a fax that explained the transaction in detail so I could understand it. Tell me how much of a limit they needed and how much of a premium they would pay, and then I would get back to them promptly. I'd call them that night. And because it was a complicated transaction they were describing. I didn't fully understand it, and people were waiting for me downstairs. Anyway, when I got back to the hotel that night, around midnight, there was no fax. Apparently it blew up at some point in that period.
What did you hear afterwards? Did they explain to you why, or what?
Well, I don't know why they felt the transaction was unfeasible, or I don't know if for some other reason that Barclays decided they couldn't go ahead with Lehman at that point. And as you know, a few days later, they actually made a transaction for the broker-dealer arrangement. But the way I understood it on Saturday at 8 o'clock New York time or so was that one of the authorities in England had ruled essentially that if it involved more than, I think, £3 billion, that they couldn't do it without shareholder approval.
Did you get other phone calls that weekend?
I got a lot of phone calls. I had a phone call on Friday night, or late Friday afternoon, on AIG, and they were going to need many, many billions of dollars by the following Wednesday. So I went down to the office on Friday night and looked hard at whether we might possibly buy a very large property casualty operation from them, and spent a few hours then. And then I called Bob Willemstad, and I said, unfortunately, I can't do this deal, and don't waste your time with me, so go someplace else. Then on Sunday, after I got back from Edmonton, AIG was in the picture again, and they were looking for an insurance policy in connection with an offer that was being made for AIG. I think it was by Chris Flowers and perhaps KKR and a few people. And they said they were going to go into a board meeting and decide whether they were going to accept this, but if they did accept it, would we be good on a certain type of reinsurance transaction? I said I thought we would. But then that blew up on Sunday night, so it was a lot of action.
Is this different than any time you'd ever experienced before?
It was, except for the Solomon experience I had in 1991 when I was more directly involved. This was a very extraordinary weekend. I mean,
what did you see in the AIG deal, in the offer there, that you thought, forget about it, this is not going to work? We were talking about buying a property casualty operation that might have sold in the 25 billion range, and what I saw indicated to me I wouldn't have wanted to pay that in the first place, and beyond that it would have required New York State Insurance Department approval and who knows what else, and there was no way to hand over a lot of money by Wednesday of the next week. In hindsight, do you have any regrets about any of the decisions you made that weekend?
No, I mean I should have been probably doing other things too. No, I am glad we didn't buy that particular insurance operation. I would have done the reinsurance transaction that was involved on Sunday night. The Lehman thing, I still don't understand even to this day exactly what the transaction was. No, it was a movie to see, but not to participate in.